coming right back. Promise.
All right. Hello, welcome. We will get started shortly. I'm just going to let all of you flood in. Happy National News Literacy Week to everyone who's joining. Hi, everyone. Yes, please drop in the chat where you're from, what you teach, and we're going to get started very shortly. Hello. All right, let's get started. Welcome to Power in Art, where we're going to be talking about how we can help elevate student voices through editorial cartooning. And of course, happy National News Literacy Week. We have several other resources and a couple other virtual events happening the remainder of the week. So please drop by the newsliteracyweek.org if you haven't had a chance yet for more information. If this is your first ever News Literacy Project webinar, then welcome and good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. Again, if you haven't yet, please let us know in the comments where you're located, what you teach. We'd love to hear from you. A little bit about us. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we are dedicated to providing educators, as well as the general public, with tools and resources to be able to better discern fact from fiction online. We are nonpartisan. I want to stress that again, because while we will be looking at a lot of different political cartoons, I'm going to be talking about them through a news literacy lens. So my name is Alexa Bolland. I'm the Senior Manager of Educator Professional Learning. It's my job to deliver professional development to educators around these crucial news literacy concepts. I'm a former journalist and fact checker myself, having worked in local journalism. But prior to that, I was also in the classroom working as a classroom journalism teacher. I'm also joined tonight by my colleague, Tori, who is behind the scenes. She's going to be dropping some helpful links throughout the entirety of the webinar. And just a reminder to everyone, this will be recorded and all of the resources will be made available to you after the fact. We'll send those via email next week, I believe, but Tori will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I am especially excited to welcome Lalo Alcaraz tonight. Lalo is an award-winning, nationally syndicated editorial cartoonist and the creator of the first nationally syndicated Latino political cartoon strip, La Cucaracha. He is a writer, a producer. He's also acted as a cultural consultant on a number of projects, including the Pixar film Coco. I'm a big Coco stan. Lalo's cartoons have covered a very wide range of issues and topics. Well, you'll see just a little bit this evening. But what really stood out to me is that his work has been used to battle vaccine hesitancy as well as COVID misinformation. And he's also the 2022 Herblock Prize winner for editorial cartooning. So Lalo, we are so happy to have you here. Welcome. And a quick agenda before we get started. This session is going to be split into two parts. The first half, we're going to focus on News Literacy Project resources. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to talk about the rich history of political cartoons, how to have your students analyze political cartoons, and then throughout the entirety of the first half, we're going to hear from Lalo about his own creative process for transforming ideas into editorial cartoons. And then in the second half of this webinar, I'm going to turn things over to Rachel Robertson from KQED. And she's going to walk you through a cartooning workshop so you can put all of these skills into practice, which I'm really excited about. And then she's also going to talk about KQED's Political Cartooning Youth Media Challenge and how your students can participate in that. So let's get started. I wanted to open actually with a quote from Lalo, who in our Power and Art Checkology lesson said, these drawings can play a watchdog role in democracy, testing boundaries, pushing buttons, exposing wrongdoings, and holding powerful people accountable for their actions. If that does not say the power in art, then I really don't know what does. So throughout this webinar, I'm going to be focusing primarily on a lot of the important aspects that are included in our free Checkology lesson, Power in Art. And this provides students with really an in-depth look at how editorial cartoonists have inspired, amused, and quite frankly, have outraged people for centuries. And I'm sure Lalo will agree with that point. The lesson explores really the watchdog role of cartoonists. And I'll also mention that the lesson is hosted by Lalo, which is another reason why I'm so excited to have him join us tonight. When we're talking about editorial cartoons, I could see how that might seem like a very narrow subject area, and finding where that fit in might seem like a challenge. But one thing I want to point out about this specific lesson from the News Literacy Project is it's very international as well as multidisciplinary scope. Political cartoons have such a rich history. They have helped document pretty much every major political event. And sometimes they have invoked some real change. So to me, this lesson could just as easily fit into a political science class, a history class, just as easily as it could journalism or art. And here are just a few sample discussion questions from the lesson that you should be able to pose to your students, some of which we're going to try to tackle today, like what makes political cartoons such an effective form of expression? And why do they make people so angry? And in today's complex digital environment, could memes even be considered modern day forms of editorial cartoons? And we're definitely going to touch on that one a little bit later. So we're going to split this up into some key learning objectives. The first being that I can identify the primary elements of an editorial cartoon. So an editorial cartoon consists of an opinion, an idea, and a drawing. And I want to make it clear that editorial cartoons are pieces of opinion journalism. If you were holding a physical newspaper, they would appear in the opinion section. And that's because while cartoons are meant to express a clear point of view, they're certainly not void of bias, or are they meant to be, but they are expected to be based on facts. And just like we expect an op-ed, a written op-ed or opinion piece to be supported with logic and reasoning, a lot of those same standards apply for editorial cartooning. So for example, we have two cartoons about Congressman George Santos. The bottom right was created by Lalo, and the one on the left was created by Michael Ramirez, who is a more conservative leaning cartoonist. And these cartoons are not calling the congressman a liar solely based on partisan views. They're not calling him a liar because they just don't like him or agree with his policy, but because journalists were able to uncover that he fabricated large parts of his resume, right? And of course, the ever-growing web of inconsistencies and falsehoods that have followed since then. So these cartoons are literally drawing on that fact. And then we have the idea, some sort of creative way of expressing this opinion. And then the actual drawing itself, which needs to use recognizable symbols as sort of visual shorthand, but without perpetuating any negative stereotypes. So Lalo, the next slide is actually a question for you about your process. But before we move on, can you talk to us a little bit about your Santos cartoon? I'm sure as an editorial cartoonist, there are lots of different ways to demonstrate that someone is being untruthful. How did you land on the Pinocchio imagery?
Well, it was really an ad that also, hello, everyone.
Hi. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can see Lalo.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It was, I welcome you to my messy studio. It reflects what's going on in my mind at any time. So that was an ad that got served up to me on my phone, I think, through Facebook maybe, and it was an ad for the classic Pinocchio movie on Disney Plus, and I just looked at that and said, I'm stealing this. And I grew up on Mad Magazine. And it's political satire. That's my, Mad Magazine is my my patron saint of political satire, just, mocking everything, taking imagery that is commonly understood and then just twisting it for your own purposes. And in this case, not too hard to make fun of, to correlate and mock this Mr. George Santos, if that's his real name, to equate him with Pinocchio. Simple one. And the way I kind of, sometimes if it's a very simple concept like that, I put effort into the drawing so it looks beautiful. And so you get the whole value of the whole thing. But yeah, recognizable symbols is number one with me. We have to speak the same language, so to speak, and visuals are our first language.
Right. I love that. And kind of building on what you were just saying, what really is your process for transforming your views into creative ideas? And for everyone watching, when Lalo is talking about a cartoon, I will try to keep that on screen, but when he's just answering a question, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can see him.
Yes, because I like to use my hands a lot. So
Me too.
What was the question? It was like, what was the process, right? Like,
what is your process for transforming your views into creative ideas?
I have no idea what my process is, but it just kind of happens. But I know, I have to have an inner, measure of what my values are and what my concepts are. And I know, like, to give you the simple list, it's immigrants' rights, it's human rights, and just kind of bashing hypocrisy and things like that. And somehow you kind of live your life like that. You try your best, and then you start seeing the stuff. I mean, you just can't simply try this one day and think you're gonna reprogram your brain. I think it takes a while, but like I said, number one is you got to have you don't talk down to the audience. You kind of meet the audience where they're at. So Pinocchio, no brainer, and also that's why cartoonists have developed symbols for Democrats, for Republicans, for things. And now the new element is the internet providing all sorts of imagery and things. And I know we're going to talk about memes later, but
yeah,
it's just a lot of information. And what I do personally, from day to day is I watch a lot of news. I read the newspaper. This is called a newspaper. It is a piece of paper, many pieces of paper. This one happens to be wrapped in plastic because it rained the other day, but it gets delivered to my house. I'm in this paper, the LA Times, and you can get on your phone and read articles and keep up on the news, and then you process all that, and you kind of pick what does an editor want to see, what's a newspaper editor going to want to see in his paper or on website in a day or so, and you just kind of choose the topic to write about and then and draw about, and it just you just got to prioritize and that's the messy version. I don't know. There's no more concise version.
I love that. Moving on to our next learning objective. This is an important one. I can summarize the historical significance of an editorial cartoon. Starting with Benjamin Franklin's Join or Die. And these are just a sample of some of the very significant works of editorial cartoons that are covered in the Checkology lesson. But Benjamin Franklin's Join or Die, this is considered to be one of the first American editorial cartoons. The severed snake represents the colonies and was used to try to really gain support for a unified colonial government. And I think this also really shows the power in art, how visual symbols can be so long lasting, because years later, the snake was used by colonists as kind of their symbol of unity against British rule. And we still see snake imagery today. more than 100 years later, the work of editorial cartoonist Thomas Nast. He used cartoons to expose widespread corruption of Representative William Boss Tweed, who, if you're not familiar, ran the Democratic Party's political machine called Tammany Hall, which really played a huge role in controlling New York politics. And it was technically journalists that exposed this widespread corruption at the time, but because literacy rates were still so much lower, his series of cartoons, Thomas Nast did almost 140 in total. That's what really illustrated the greed for people. It helped shape public opinion in a way that the long form opinion pieces couldn't, and it really helped hold him accountable. Nast also gave us several iconic symbols, Lalo, that you mentioned, the donkey, the elephant. He popularized those. He also gifted us the modern image of Santa Claus, which I didn't know until I went through the Checkology course myself. And really through every major event on the women's suffrage movement, the First World War, through prohibition, through the Second World War, editorial cartoonists were there. They exposed wrongdoings and they offered their biting criticism to help shape public opinion. Tonight would pretty much be an epic failure if I did not talk about Herb Block, who went by his pen name Herb Block, one word. It's probably one of the most prolific editorial cartoonists whose career spanned 70 years. He chronicled our nation's history from the Great Depression on. And when I was putting this presentation together, of course, there are a lot of cartoons that really just don't hold up to the test of time. And that's not the case with his work. There were plenty of cartoons that he did from the civil rights movement, cartoons about equal opportunity in the workplace, gender issues, that I totally would have believed were created and published even today. So that might be an interesting classroom activity, guess the era. Editorial cartoons can certainly be used to demonstrate how far we've come, but they can also showcase issues that persist today. The Herb Block Foundation also has a lot of additional lesson plans and resources for discussing his work, as well as some other significant cartoons in the classroom. And I think Tori's going to drop a link in the chat for me. But back to Lalo, what editorial cartoon stands out to you for its strong impact on the public? And we actually posed this question to Lalo beforehand so that we could get an image to show you. So Lalo, talk to us about this specific cartoon and why does it stand out to you?
Oh, I also, I didn't want to mention this, but the current Herb Block winner is talking to you right now, the Herb Block Award. That would be me. So anyway, this cartoon is from a cartoonist named Ron Cobb, who on many different layers, the cartoonist work has always spoken to me. Layers, ironically, is what we're looking at. This cartoon is his famous Thanksgiving cartoon, iconic, where it shows it's got a positive and negative space thing going on visually up here, and it's got a white rectangle showing a family having Thanksgiving dinner, and then below it shows the foundations of what's holding up that holiday, but really what's kind of holding up the whole kind of American culture, which is Native Americans, and the people that were here before the colonizers. And it's just a cartoon that it's hard hitting. It takes a sacrosanct American holiday, right, and doesn't flip it on its head, but it shows the other side, the origins, and it has so many layers to it again. And to me, Ron Cobb, this cartoonist, has many layers because he was a alt weekly cartoonist in LA maybe 20 years before I started, maybe 30 years. I mean, in the 60s, right? He's doing cartoons in LA for the LA Free Press, I think, one of the forerunners to the alternative weekly cartoons. I used to draw in the LA Weekly in 1992, starting on. And he also became most LA residents, he became involved in the entertainment industry and was a production designer for many amazing films like Aliens and the Alien movie franchise. He designed a lot of the spaceships and the cars and the technology in it, and he's just my superhero. And I actually, I reached out to his family. He was still alive a couple of years ago, but he's since passed away. But he was already in hospice, and I was like, really, one of my regrets in my life. Try to reach out to your heroes. Don't listen to that thing about don't meet your heroes. If you try to reach out to me, buy me a drink, and I'll be good. But this cartoon is just from an iconic cartoonist. I also love the cartoons of Paul Conrad, another iconic left-leaning cartoonist. It's just an amazing, this is a piece of art. It's not just a random cartoon popping up in a newspaper.
Yeah, and this really brings us to kind of the next point that's heavily stressed in the Checkology lesson, which is the importance of diverse voices as well as perspectives. So throughout the 20th century, and most certainly during the 19th, there were many cartoons that really did include overtly racist and sexist imagery. Newsrooms back then were simply not the most diverse or inclusive spaces to be, and that meant that these portrayals went unchallenged. And this isn't to say that there weren't Black cartoonists or cartoonists of color publishing work at this time. There certainly were. But these cartoons, like this one from Oliver Harrington, who also went by Ollie Harrington, these were featured in a publication that served the Black community, and they were largely excluded from mainstream publications. So we can talk to students about how diversity in cartooning has helped broaden the range of opinions in the national conversation, but also discuss how a lack of diversity within newsroom, which unfortunately is still a problem today in some cases, is what has helped perpetuate negative stereotypes, and how a range of voices, especially in political cartooning, can help keep these negative stereotypes from becoming widespread today. So Lalo, back over to you. You were recently awarded the Herb Black Prize for editorial cartooning. I would not mention that.
I apologize. I apologize for in the Herb Black reference now.
You became the first ever Latino recipient, and really, what did that moment mean for you? And I'm going to stop sharing now.
Gosh, it came at a right time because I had just kind of been I was a Pulitzer finalist twice, but shenanigans occurred when the award was thrown out in one way or another each time that I was nominated. So my friends teased me and said I broke the Pulitzers. And then they changed the name of the Pulitzer's Editorial Cartoon Award to the Illustrated Journalism something, which I still applied. They still took my money. We're there, you never know. A girl can dream, right? So it was a great honor to get the Herb Block, because Herb Block was like, he's in my cartoon gang. He was just a great cartoonist who gave his whole life for editorial cartooning and really paved the way. Again, like the guy that who did the Santa Claus, right? Thomas Nast. I mean, Herb Block came up with the Cold War. That was one of his things that he created in his cartooning, and his work is just amazing. And I'm merely like jumping for joy in the shadow of Herb Block, and I'm going next month or in March to go judge the next Herb Block award. So
Wow.
it's really it's an honor and a responsibility, so it's just something I'm glad finally happened.
Well, very well deserved too. Very well deserved.
Thank you.
Let's see. So we talked earlier about how reputable political cartoons are forms of opinion journalism. Sometimes they can veer off into propaganda territory. And sometimes people will call fact-based editorial cartoons propaganda when they don't align with their own views. So we do have a lot of resources to help really clearly define as well as differentiate the two. So editorial cartoons, yes, they can be funny, but like opinion journalism op-eds, their main purpose is to persuade you to kind of take on a similar point of view. And they might use a mix of exaggeration, caricatures, symbols to try to do this. But editorial cartoons, yeah, they will illuminate a range of issues and viewpoints, sometimes those that are overshadowed and overlooked. But above all else, editorial cartoonists are expected to get their facts right. There has to be some evidence that they can point to that supports the cartoon. Whereas propaganda, on the other hand, is designed to provoke you, whereas opinion is designed to persuade. Propaganda might make a really strong emotional appeal by being misleading or just downright deceptive. It presents one viewpoint as being absolute. And it might also use caricatures, but in a way that is dehumanizing. And people often still disagree on where to draw the line between it being an editorial cartoon and propaganda. And to me, the line in the sand is facts. And so to help students distinguish between the two, one activity could be to have them select a cartoon that they feel is opinion and one that they feel is propaganda and have them explain their reasoning there. We have that activity and some other resources on our Flipgrid that Tori is going to drop in the chat. Museum also has just a ton of amazing resources for talking to students about propaganda. However, you'll see that they use kind of the SEED method as the warning signs of propaganda. Oversimplification, exploitation, exaggeration, and division. But the warning sign of exaggeration might not necessarily apply when you're talking about that in terms of editorial cartoons. But editorial cartoons, they have a hard job. They have to convey a lot, opinions about really complex issues and very small amounts of space. So that means they have to rely on visual shorthand or symbols to be representative of other things. Lalo, can you talk to us a little bit about this cartoon and the care that went into it? And then speaking as a cultural consultant, how do you draw on cultural imagery without perpetuating stereotypes?
Sure. Let's back up a second and talk about hyperbole for a second. And the previous slide about exaggeration, like we have to use, Benjamin Franklin used a little hyperbole in this, because if you join up a snake that's been chopped up, it's not going to come to life, right? Like it's the metaphors and the hyperbole and there's some exaggeration that you have to accept. But yeah, when you're exaggerating and saying that, Mexican immigrants have horns or devil tails, yeah, that's where that comes in. And I like that weed seed chart. Anyway, all right. What are we talking about? No, just kidding. So
the care that went into this specific cartoon.
This came up when everyone was drawing cartoons about Obama, President Obama. Oh, the people were wringing their hands and like, how are you going to draw Obama without being racist? And I said, well, you just draw Obama, like do a caricature. Don't let it, because I guess we're not, used to lionizing Black people in the US and representing them on an equal footing with everyone else. So I guess people were kind of worried about what cartoonists were going to do. But to me, it's like, well, you don't perpetuate, kind of known stereotypes. Any responsible visual artist knows the history of visual stereotyping and things. And then, as someone that draws, Mexican American, Latino cartoon characters in not just my editorial cartoons, but in my daily strip. I had all that thrown at me. Well, you can't, if you draw a Latino with a mustache, that's a racist stereotype. I was like, no, it's not, like my dad had a mustache just like that guy in the farm worker comic strip, I think that, people weaponize that conversation a little too much, but you do have to be thoughtful, and you do have to know what's the history of representation of everything, and in my case, I'm a very pro-immigrant cartoonist. My parents were Mexican immigrants. They were not farm workers, but I know the farm worker community. I've worked with it. I've done work for them. This cartoon actually came about because my friends at the United Farm Workers were like, hey, you're going to do a cartoon about farm workers and Thanksgiving? Hint, hint, they kept telling, it's all family love, like they were like, are you going to do this, please? And I said, all right. And I came up with this image of two farm workers holding a platter or a table of Thanksgiving food. And it came out around Thanksgiving. I think it was a very successful cartoon. Although one of my friends was like, oh, I want to be that dude and eat that food, so, but that's not the point of the cartoon, but okay.
Nice. Moving on to another learning objective. It's really important for students, especially as they gain an understanding, being able to analyze and interpret editorial cartoons. Students live in an increasingly visual environment, information environment. So this is certainly applicable skills elsewhere as well. So we're going to run through some visual elements and that we want students to be able to recognize. And then I'm going to have Lalo talk through and sort of self-analyze his cartoons that include that element, starting with caricature, which exaggerates a person's features. Like we have this caricature of Elon Musk on the left. And I'm constantly amazed at how cartoonists are able to make people look like literally anything. So Lalo, talk to me about your use of caricatures, as well as how this caricature of Alex Jones after the Sandy Hook verdict came to be.
Wow. I'm sorry that I didn't know that was supposed to be Elon Musk, but Elon Musk has a very unique face, so he's tough to draw. I may have put him in La Cucaracha at some point. So caricatures are hard. They're not, you have to learn to exaggerate a person's features to kind of make them a recognizable caricature. And so Alex Jones, he's a very unlikable person, and I'm not trying to put down our friends from the pork tribe, but he was a natural as a piggy bank. I did my best to kind of combine his face with that pig nose, which I've done before with other characters out there in the news cycle. So I did my best to I think it would have helped if I showed his whole body standing up. In retrospect, him as a kind of a two-legged pig, I think it would have looked a little more. But this came up. I am doing so good with time. I was worried that I was going to talk too much, but I think I'm okay. Right? Am I okay? Yeah.
You're good. We have a few more to get through.
Silence is compliance. Okay, so so I did. Oh shoot! What cartoon? What character I did? Oh yes, this came up. The cartoon I did. It wasn't a editorial cartoon that I put in my feed, but it was Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, who is disabled and sits in a wheelchair. So every time I've drawn him in an editorial cartoon, I draw him seated in one form or another. One literally dragging immigrants to dump them off at the Statue of Liberty is one. Another one is he's got a giant backpack full of immigrants at the border, and he's like taking them across the border. And then I just drew one when I was really angry at him, and I drew him as a pile of you know what, right? But I added wheels to it. And so I just posted it, and there was a few people that were upset about the portrayal, the adding of the wheels. But I had some second thoughts about it. Certainly not making fun of disabled people, just trying to portray this character in the news, and he's in a wheelchair. And so these things do come up more so than, the caricature of what the face looks like. That's like, I mean, good caricaturists, they don't come along every day. So my hat's off to like actual, caricaturists that do that for a living, but it's hard to capture a person's face. But sometimes there's other issues like his mobility issues. So I try to work him in to a cartoon in a reasonable, respectful way, even though I can't stand the guy and I think he should like drop off the face of the earth. So it's a tough one. I'm just a guy with a pencil.
Moving on to archetype, which we talked a little bit about earlier, which in cartooning uses a character or an icon to serve for an entire group. So we're all probably very familiar with the elephant and the donkey representing Republicans and Democrats. Uncle Sam is a very popular archetype of the United States or of Americans. Lalo, we do have a few to get through, but how important are archetypes in your cartooning? And I would love to hear how you decided on these when you were putting together this specific cartoon on the right.
Okay, I'm going to go fast like a car app. All right. So, well, yeah, I've used Uncle Sam. I've used all of these. This one I used two very recognizable things: a kind of a witch burning, image, and then a Puritan representing the right-wing school boards that are against any minority representation. So this comes up with my work depicting people of color and Latinos. And, I often say it's not a stereotype, it's an archetype. Like I have a guy, taco cart guy, that in my comic strip, and people say, oh, so I have heard, oh, that's a stereotype, a Mexican guy with tacos. I'm like, well, he's a street vendor. How are you going to represent him otherwise than showing what he does? He sells tacos. I mean, these people exist, and they're not, to me, they're not stereotypes, they're archetypes. I vote for shifting the definition of that word a little bit over to more to archetype. And as long as it's not the punchline, to demean any group, I think it's okay. So.
Yeah. So interesting. Then we have a symbol, which in cartooning can also stand for a concept, an idea, could also stand for a group or a character. So for example, the bear in the top right, that would symbolize Russia. Lalo, this cartoon that you did in the bottom left, I think it's also a really good reminder that not all political cartoons have to have some humorous edge or punchline to them. I'd love to hear your process for creating this cartoon. Was the symbol of a coffin really forefront in your mind, or did you go through other possible symbols when wanting to put together this message?
I'm sure it was the first thing that popped into my head, and then I considered other things like sunken graves. I haven't seen this cartoon in a while, and it was not, anything pleasant for sure, because it was such a terrible issue of youth in detention and dying. So, yeah, I've gotten those hate mails of people saying how, or internet, social media posts saying, how dare you mock this image? I'm like, I'm not playing this for a laugh. It should be pretty obvious that I'm not saying, yaka, 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 hilarious. This is a very sad, tragic situation. So, look at the Michael de Adder cartoon on the right. It's, an amazing representation of the oppression of women in Iran. And once in a while, Michael Ramirez and I agree on a topic, and he renders beautifully. But I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack to the archetype stereotype thing. Michael Ramirez, nice guy, but holds a world record for representing Mexicans as cannibalistic Aztec Indians. And it's really not a cool thing when he does that. And I've told him so to his face, that it's, he's taking a stereotype that's used against a group of people to represent a group of people. And that's a negative way to do it. And he represents Mexican Americans that way. And he's half Mexican himself. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to delve into that. But I mean, that's the wrong way to represent a group of people using a negative stereotype. I'll be quiet now.
We're actually next talking about stereotypes. So first, I'm going to briefly talk about trope. This actually isn't a Lalo cartoon, but trope sometimes can sound like it has a negative connotation, but in cartoons is really just a reference to a theme that's widely understood, like the idea of breaking a glass ceiling. And then we do have stereotypes, which are used to represent an entire group, but in an offensive way, like you mentioned, that does dehumanize a group. And to your point, I was looking back at old cartoons, and it really serves as a reminder of just how socially acceptable it was to express this kind of extreme prejudice in pop culture. But when I was pulling current examples for this webinar, I still felt like I was coming across some cartoons that to me seemed to perpetuate some negative stereotypes. So really, Lalo, I guess I'm curious, how prevalent are negative stereotypes in cartooning still today? And how do you think we address them? It seemed like you've kind of reached out to other cartoonists when you do think that they're not living up to those standards.
This came up literally last week or 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine, an award-winning cartoonist, who's a very good friend of mine, reached out to me and said, hey, me and this other cartoonist, we're very offended by this cartoon that someone else drew, one of our colleagues, one of our conservative colleagues, about Joe Biden's visit to the border. And I'm not going to say more about it, but it was not a cool representation in the year 2023 of Mexican culture. And again, this speaks back to the lack of representation in journalism, the very low levels that Latinos have in newsrooms. It's around 6 to 8% generally. It's kind of reflects the representation of Latinos in kids' books, which is odd, around that kind of 8% level where we're about 20% of the population these days. And it's just, that's part of it, and just general ignorance. And so it does still happen. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but, and then when I come up to you at a convention and say, hey man, you're messing up. that happens. So but I can't cover all these guys, that's a lot. It's a big patrol.
Yeah, but it's important to, hold others in our fields accountable, and journalists do it all the time. And I imagine that editorial cartoonists do it all the time. Kind of another question for you. You talked a little bit about earlier with your cartoon about the detention centers, but what do you think it is about political cartoons that elicit such strong responses? Why are they kind of such effective and powerful forms of expression?
Okay, here's my kooky theory. doodles and cartoons were our first language, even before probably we spoke as human-like creatures. We were drawing stuff and we were making motions with our hands, and it's just our really primal. It's such a primal language, cartooning, drawing, doodling. It's such a ingrained thing for us. I mean, languages are based on imagery, like written alphabets, and it's just so powerful that when you as a reader see an image that it's so simple and yet complex at the same time, and I mean, I'd call that elegantly designed and created, it just blows your mind. It's very, and if you could
Powerful.
yeah, it's very powerful. And if you could, and it doesn't go away, like the phrase rent free in your head. Oh, it's in there forever. It came in and squatted in your brain forever. And imagine, being that person, and imagine, you should imagine reading my hate mail is what you should imagine. You would know that people are very perturbed by the thing, whatever cartoon I did really affected them to the point that they had to write me a hate letter. But like I always say, if you're trying to, defeat me, I already won, because my image is in your head forever. You're annoyed by it forever. And unless you're going to draw a better cartoon than I did, you're just sending me a letter. Okay, congrats on winning second place.
Yeah, and visuals, symbols like that, they really do leave such a lasting mark on us. And we could remember a political cartoon, but we might not remember the entire op-ed that accompanied it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so interesting. Okay, our last key learning objective before I shift gears and I hand things over to Rachel Robertson from KQED to kind of put this into a workshop for us is I can explain modern forms of graphic political expression. Or I can explain how modern forms of graphic political expression compare with editorial cartoons, which brings us to memes, which we teased in the beginning, which in some ways, are kind of similar to editorial cartoons. They can express a point of view using images with very minimal text. They can spread ideas very quickly. And the fact that they're amusing most of the time also means that they have the ability to go really viral. So I pulled some political cartoons that were very memeable moments online. And this could also be a really fun classroom activity as well. Find a story in the news that inspired a political cartoonist that also became an internet trend on its own, and have them talk about how they're different. So we have Prince Harry taking aim at the royal family with the release of his new book, Spare. And then we have the meme version where people wrote fake excerpts from the book, making fun of what, some people thought might have been some oversharing. And then we have another Lalo cartoon commenting on Kevin McCarthy's battle to become the House Speaker. Seemed like each vote ignited a new wave of memes. So Lalo, we actually got a sneak peek of this cartoon when we met before this. At vote 11 or 12, were you already kind of envisioning a possible quinceañera reference?
Yeah, you know what? It was in the air. I mean, people were like, when it was about, I was thinking about it, but then when it came to around vote 14 and it was no end in sight, people will start to, somebody, as I think somebody, what I did is I tweeted out, oh, this is going to be Kevin's, the quinceañera that he finally wanted, as a tweet, just text. And then somebody said, oh my God, you got to draw that. I'm like, yeah, I know, damn it. I got to draw it. I hate when that happens. But then I visualized it in my head. Then I saw a meme of it. Like people started memeing it, like, hurry up, draw this cartoon. And they photoshopped Kevin McCarthy's head on a quinceañera girl at her event. And I was like, oh God, I gotta stay up all night and draw this. So I did. I knew it'd be a good one. Definitely going in my award portfolio next year. And it's got a lot of stuff going on in the background too. It just kind of, it goes over and above what a meme would do. But, we talk about this a lot too. We see that memes can be like the democratization of cartooning. Like if you can't draw, but if you have a funny joke and you can put visually in your mind, like the images, and maybe you come up with a good funny meme, it's approaching an editorial cartoon, kind of the same concept, but I'm going to stick to minimum requirement, you have to draw it.
It's funny you brought up that you saw a meme version of it, because one of my follow-up questions before you beat me to it was actually, have you ever been inspired by meme culture? Since memes are pretty much the currency of the internet these days.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, though, there are some major differences that we need to point out for students. Again, it bears repeating that solid editorial cartoons are based on logic and reasoning. Cartoons that aren't rooted in some sort of fact, I would like to say wouldn't, but shouldn't be published by reputable outlets. But really, as Lalo said, anyone can create a meme, and that means that they can pass off falsehoods as facts. This Prince Harry meme, for example, the trend was to literally create false book excerpts. So memes can, also express some baseless opinions, but that are also possibly even offshoots of really harmful conspiracy theories. But most importantly, memes are created without any sort of editorial standards. So Lalo, this is actually the last question that I have for you before we're going to shift over to Rachel. But how is this important form of opinion journalism changing, do you think? And where do you think it's headed?
Wow, that's a good one, because I think the principles of it are universal and long lasting, and but yeah, we have a much faster news cycle. We have memes. We have there's a lot of information coming at us, and it's hard to speed up and editorial cartoons. Some people have done animated editorial cartoons. That's a new thing. I wish I had all the time in the world to do that. I don't have a staff to do that. But I think they're going to last. I think it's a classic art form. It's not going to go away. I have tried to figure out the publication angle of this, and I try to, even though I don't have a local newspaper in Los Angeles that carries my editorial cartoons, I try to be the editorial page of myself for Southern California by just publishing my cartoons, at a moment's notice. And actually, I can show you the cartoon I did yesterday to try to respond to a local news that I knew I had to do this. I had to respond to the local news story about the Monterey Park mass shooting. And I did this kind of Chinese New Year rabbit, Year of the Rabbit with Monterey Park on it, and with like 11 little marks there for the people that passed away. And I just felt like I have to do that just to kind of mark this event. Even I don't have a newspaper that it's for sure going to publish it. It's going to go through my syndicate, and I think it's we have to take into account technology and how people are consuming news and opinion, and even just maybe a piece of art that'll make you feel a little better or a little somber or something. It's just I don't know. I'm usually pretty psychic about things, but this one I'm not that psychic about.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Well, Lalo, thank you so much for spending so much time with us, sharing your expertise. It was so lovely getting to talk to you about your work. Rachel from KQED, I apologize we went over, but really great conversation. So Lalo, again, thank you so much. Now for everyone, we are going to shift to the workshop portion of the webinar. Perfect, all set up. Rachel is from KQED and she's going to put all of these skills into practice. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Lalo. It's so great to hear from you. As I mentioned before, I'm a huge fan.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to switch gears because now that.
Am I done?
Yes, thank you so much.
I want to invite everyone to laloalcaraz.com. Meet me there.
Oh, of course. And we will drop that in the comments as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So after you are inspired by amazing cartoonists like Lalo and do this Checkology lesson, which really helps us go so deep into the art of political cartooning, now then what do you do with students? Well, you have them create their own cartoons. And so this portion of the workshop we're going to really quickly is about you will have a chance to get started or perhaps even finish a cartoon of your own creation in the preparation of sharing it with students. So if you have a pen and paper handy, go ahead and grab it or open a new tab if you do digital drawing. My name is Rachel Robertson. I'm KQED's professional learning program manager with the humanities focus. KQED is a public media station here in the Bay Area, but we have a national community of teachers, many of whom are here today. It's great to see some familiar names on the participant list who are committed to media literacy learning in whatever subject area you teach. So you have the slides, they're going to be dropped in, and I'm going to go ahead and drop them in myself. We really encourage you to grab these slides and use them as you will. One of the things that you will find when you use these slides is that all of these things that KQED does are buttons that you can link to and find out how you can get some free professional learning for yourself and connect your students to each other through our youth media challenges, which we'll talk about later. So we're going to continue to explore how cartooning can engage students in civic dialogue on all parts of the political spectrum through creative expression. You're going to get started creating yourself. And then if you are a middle or high school teacher, you'll learn about an opportunity for your students to publish their cartoons to a wider audience through KQED's nationally open youth media challenge on political cartooning. So when we talk about media literacy, we think it's really important to do what the News Literacy Project does so well, which is analyze and evaluate information. But media literacy also adds that creative piece, because we would never say students were literate if they could read but not write. And we want our students to analyze and evaluate and really dive into what they're seeing and learning in the news and elsewhere. But we also want them to be creators and not just consumers. And so if you're excited about this Checkology lesson, one way to really complement it would be to have students then create their own cartoons to share their views on something that matters to them. And so our pedagogy with teachers is really to just jump in, have you do the same thing, not to pretend like you're a student, because that's not true, but to build confidence, kind of get a sense of how it would be to lead students through a cartooning project. And then that'll help you plan better, help you experience what they might be going through, and think about how it might work in your classroom setting. So KQED's Political Cartooning Youth Media Challenge asks students in middle and high school nationwide to choose an issue they care about. It can be anything, and to create a one-panel cartoon about that issue. We, kind of like Lalo just said, still say you gotta draw it yourself. So this is not a meme challenge, this is a cartooning challenge. And so students are invited to draw an original cartoon. They can draw it by hand or they can do it using digital tools, but it must be an idea original to them. And then they are invited to publish it on KQED's Youth Media Showcase. And on the slides, there are a link to curriculum resources for how to do this with students in both English and Spanish. And then you'll see how KQED has elevated some of those voices from all over the country in blog posts that we do to celebrate student voice. So youth media challenges are not a contest, they're a challenge, and all student work is submitted. All student work is published as it is submitted. The challenge is open throughout the school year, so you're the one as the educator who gets to determine the deadline for the challenge. however it fits into your classroom. And again, we have this curriculum that's modifiable in both English and Spanish, so you can take it, you know your students a lot better than we do, and you can modify it to fit your needs. So let's dive in. We've already done a lot of analyzing, so we're not going to do as much analyzing today, but we are going to sort of analyze a little bit through the lens of a creator. And then you can lead students through finding your spark, and Lalo talked about kind of how he found his spark for his idea. We're going to brainstorm some visual symbols, and then you're going to get started. So if you're looking at political cartooning as a creator, you know the process. We just went over it. You have an opinion, you have an idea about a cartoon, and then you're going to put it into action drawing. But if you're like me, your drawing skills might still be developing, and your students might be going through that as well. You also have those students who will like throw a party when you tell them that they get to draw as part of class, right? So there are students who are super confident and excited about visual expression, and then there are other students who are like, I don't know about this. And so it's always good to remind cartoonists before they get going that we're talking about a few words, we're talking about some visual symbols, and to share with them lots of examples of cartoons, but also ones such as this one here to the right by KQED's cartoonist Mark Fiore. That's a very simple drawing that explains a very complex issue, global warming and climate change, in a pretty simple way. And so you don't have to be, an amazing artist to express and take a few words and some symbols to take a stand or send a message about an issue. And so, it's also a great opportunity to look historically at how images and visual symbols are carefully chosen. And if you're looking at cartooning as a creator, right? So after you've analyzed it and done all the amazing work in the Checkology lesson, then you're thinking, okay, how am I going to do this myself? Taking another look at some of the things that cartoons tell us about society and some of the ways that those visual symbols are used to communicate those things is a good thing to do. So, you might talk about, oh, this is a wealthy man. I can tell because he has a top hat, he has spats, he's wearing a suit. The press is being used as a symbol to crush or press a worker between these two things. And again, this cartoon is true to in the past, and it also might have echoes today. The characterization of the folks is, you can see their emotion on their faces. So that's communicated through the cartoon. So when you get ready to start creating yourself, you might want to revisit some of the things that you learned while in the analysis phase, and then start thinking about how they would work for you as a creator. And I hope you're doing this now as we're going through this. Portraying people, we've talked about that, right? But characterization versus caricature, right? There's a lot of things you can do in a cartoon that really gets the emotions of the people across. And so this is a great example of characterization, right? These are two they're using sort of facial expressions to communicate contrasting emotions. Also just a few words to do that. So who are the characters and how do they feel and how do they know? And as a creator, are you going to have people in your cartoons? Are you going to portray them? How are you going to portray them or characterize their feelings? And how can you do that in a relatively simple way? And again, we have resources kind of throughout our Youth Media Challenge curriculum to help you do that. Again, with the intention of having students then create their own. We talked about character already, right? I mean, that's something I'm not going to revisit, but if you're going to caricature someone famous, we actually have a video about that if you'd like to show that to students. But being careful about where those lines are and what kinds of things you're sort of emphasizing when you're caricaturing them. And then we don't have time for this, but I want to show you our Youth Media Showcase very quickly. And this is filtered already, pre-filtered for the Political Cartooning Challenge. So you can see on the site, how many students are already participating and uploading their photos. Many of them are hand-drawn, but not all of them. So there are pages and pages of youth examples, youth mentor texts. So, the professionals are also inspirational, like we heard how inspirational they are, but hearing and seeing other students share their views and what kinds of issues they're concerned about would be a great opportunity for your students. And we actually have here on the slides a cartoon peer mentor text collection that if you want to add to, you're welcome to do that. But it even has some from previous workshops, so you can kind of see what other educators have highlighted for their own students. You can add some to this doc, or you can just go through our youth media showcase, or give your students a chance to do the same to see what kinds of issues are really standing out for young people. And I'm going so fast because I do not ever want to stop a workshop without getting some creation time going. So we're going to talk a lot about kind of coming up with our own ideas. We're going to do this now together. Coming up with our own ideas, and then, you know, getting to this sketch phase. So no one's expecting you to, you know, produce an amazingly, you know, perfect cartoon by the end. But we do want to talk about how cartoonists find their ideas and how they kind of bring those into fruition. This is a video I'm not going to show today. The first 4 minutes of it, though, is basically says exactly what Lalo just told us, but it's in video form, about how Mark Fiore, KQED's cartoonist, finds his spark. And he does it the same way that we've heard about today. You know, he looks at the news, he pages through, you know, social media, he looks for headlines and captions and various phrases that really jump out to him as a way of inspiring a cartoon. He calls it finding his spark. And so it's a great opportunity. And I really, this is a very classroom friendly video. It's not only designed for classrooms, but it's a very classroom friendly video that really takes you through the process of doing that kind of investigation and then how that might turn into a cartoon. The whole video is 8 minutes, but it's the first 4 minutes that really talk about finding your spark. So that's what we're going to do together. But before that, there was a question, and I wanted to just raise up a question. I think it was Kevin, if you're still on, you know, of all the different ways that if you want to explore digital drawing, this is just a link in the slides to all the different types of digital drawing resources that are available to you. Some you might have access to through your district, others, you know, might be something that someone might have on an app. But if you know anything that you want to add to this, just drop it in the chat and we'll add to it at future workshops. So these are all digital tools students have used and teachers have used with students to do digital drawing. So what we're going to do now, and this is, we are going to stop, take a deep breath, and start doing some creating ourselves. So I'm going to set the timer for 8 minutes. And what I'd like you to do during the 8 minutes is to make a list of 4 or 5 issues that are really top of mind for you. What do you care about? And what are you thinking about? And then from that list, narrow it down to like 1 or 2, and then go looking for your spark. And you might do that by just like opening up your phone and scrolling through, you know, your favorite news source, social media, anything around that issue. And what you're looking for is a quote or a headline or a story, something that kind of sticks out to you, even a phrase or a part of something that someone has said. Or maybe you've seen a caption or a headline that really draws your attention. And then capture your spark by writing it down or copying and pasting what you find. And once you find that, go ahead and drop it in the chat so we know kind of what issue you're thinking about. And at the end of 8 minutes, we're going to then transition to turning that spark into a sketch of a cartoon. So go ahead. I'm going to set the timer now. Go ahead and start doing that. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box or put them in the chat. But right now, this is your chance to create. So follow these steps and we'll reconvene in about 7.5 minutes. I'm actually going to move us forward in time a little bit because I want to make sure we have time for composition 2. So if you're continuing to find your spark, just go ahead and keep doing it. If you have an idea about what you want to do your cartoon about, we'd love for you to drop it in the chat so we can see what your spark is and what you're thinking about in terms of your issue. And we'll get started again soon. Excellent job. Keep those ideas coming. Love to see these sparks already, or perhaps you'd be inspired by someone else's spark in the chat. We have about a minute left and then we will move on. All right, in the next 10 seconds, if you have a spark, go ahead and share it. Love to hear it. Drop it in. All righty, just scrolling through these amazing ideas. And so this is great. And if you don't have an idea yet and you're like, I don't know yet, just come to the chat because these are some amazing ideas. And so like this group right now, your students will also have lots of different issues and lots of different ideas of things that they've heard about, things that matter to them, things that might have learned in your class. So just like us, your students will have a variety of issues to explore. And one of the best ways of supporting them is by giving them that choice and by opening up the field and by, again, leading them through a process where all ideas kind of are welcome to be expressed. And I know that some of you, like Jennifer, cannot wait to get composing. Others of you might be like, Kate, I appreciate your help. I always get myself into this issue where I'm like, oh shoot, now I actually have to draw something. But that's what we're gonna do next. So the next slide is around the sketch. And so what you can do if you are not someone who is super excited about getting sketching started is to just make a list of the visual symbols that might go with your spark. So for me with ChatGPT, I was like, well, a computer obviously is a symbol. Student work, like a pile of student work might be a symbol, right? Because a lot of educators are worried that ChatGPT is gonna like give kids the answer. Writing or a pen versus a computer might be a way to express the anxiety around this new thing. So I've just made sort of a list of all these. Now I am going to draw something because I'm going to take that risk and jump in. But that's something that you should definitely do for your spark, unless you're super excited about starting to create, and then you should definitely start sketching and drafting. Hopefully by the time the 10 minutes are up, everyone will at least be starting sketching or drafting. And then for those of you who are superstars, which I know we have some here, Tori's going to drop a link to our share doc in the chat. A cartoon that I made previously is in there as an example. So if you want to just click and take a picture of your sketch and upload it somewhere and drop a link into that share doc, we'll have a very short time to celebrate at the end of this time. So go ahead and jump in, start making a list of visual symbols, start sketching some, start getting your composition ready. And then I'll give you a little warning about 3 minutes out if you have anything to add to the share doc. We hope you do. It's true. And people are like, wait, I can't draw. If you want some inspiration about someone who can't draw, please make your way to the share doc and look at my cartoon example from a previous workshop. You will also see that I cannot draw, but I can draw visual symbols, and I can use symbols to make a point and send a message about something that I believe in. So if you think you can't draw, maybe you're just developing those skills, but I'd be willing to bet you can do a visual symbol. So give it a chance, just jump in, no fear, and see what comes out. Folks, you have about 3 minutes left, and if you're still drawing, you're exactly where you need to be. But if you are on a computer and you have a phone, you can take a picture of your cartoon. And then if you have a way to get it onto Google Drive, as you would any attachment, you could email your photo to yourself, and then get it on your computer, and then get it onto Google Drive in the way you'd get anything onto Drive. And then you can share a link to that photo onto the Share Doc if you're interested in doing that. It's a few steps, but some folks are used to, sort of uploading between devices onto Drive. And if you're able to do that, that would be great. And if not, absolutely no problem. But we'd love to see some of your work, even if you're just not even like done yet, but just kind of where you're going with it. So we have about 2 minutes left, and wherever you are, even if you don't want to share, you are exactly where you need to be, and we'll get together again in a sec. Alrighty, again, wherever you are is exactly where you need to be. I'm going to head over quickly to the Share Doc to see if anyone had a chance. It was a very short amount of time, and usually we don't, but we do have some folks who have shared. So Alexa, yay, and Larry, yay, and I see that Dexton put his link in the chat. And folks are in the Share Doc, so if you're in the Share Doc, stay in the Share Doc. It's like voting. So you can see Kate, my chat GPT cartoon, and there's lots of different ones to show. Alexa, do you want to quickly talk about yours?
Sure, yeah. So at the News Literacy Project, one thing I hear a lot about is like, oh, well, they're digital natives, but there's no such thing as a digital native. You're not born with the ability to discern fact from fiction online. And so a lot of the times we make assumptions about young people and their habits online. And so this was my attempt to make a fiery flamed computer with the kind of parent to the side saying, it's fine, she's a digital native. This was a lot harder than I thought it would be. But
no,
it was fun.
I love it. It's great. And so, oh my gosh, I love the computer on fire symbolism. It's wonderful. Do you mind if we share yours, Dexton? I know Dexton, so I'm actually going to take this as a yes. So yes, high cost of healthcare in the US. There's lots going on in this cartoon. Thank you so much for sharing that. And let's see. Jasmine, do you mind if we share yours? I'll wait to get that. Oh, yay. Thank you for saying yes, Jackson. Jasmine, I don't want to just go ahead, but definitely look at Jasmine's, and if you still have yours.
You got the
Jasmine
yes
says
from
yes.
Jasmine, yeah.
Oh, I did not want to break consent here. Jasmine. Oh, this is amazing. Oh my goodness, Jasmine, this is wonderful. So lots of imagery of incarceration. Again, figures are not in this. We have dialogue bubbles and something symbolizing the jail. And then we are being sent a very powerful message about the politics around drag right now. So this is wonderful. Again, if you're in the share doc, stay in the share doc and add yours to it. Where our time is rapidly coming to a close, but I just wanted to say before we said goodbye, that on the slides is instructions for how your students can publish their cartoons. It's very simple. You create an account, they do not. And so once you get a code for them to submit, their submissions will be attached to your class. And we would just love to see as many student voices as possible from all over the political spectrum on the showcase, where you can right now find cartoons from all over the place. We do lots of learning at KQED, so check that slide out if you liked this and want to do more. And then this is my email. And Jennifer, I've already given you permission to email me with your cartoon. I cannot wait. But any of you can email me, keep in touch. Let me know how this is going. Let me know if you have questions about publishing your students' work. I'm here and so glad that we're connected. And now I'm going to hand it back to Alexa to close.
Thank you so much, Rachel. This was so fun. And I think it's like great to put all of these skills into practice for ourselves, especially when we're asking it of our students. So Tori also dropped a link all about the KQED Youth Media Challenge and how your students can get involved there. And just a reminder, all of these resources will be made available to you in an email. Rachel, I want to apologize again for going over in the beginning half, but I think we covered a lot of ground and this is a really fun activity. I want to just share my screen very quickly because we have a QR code for our survey. It's really important. Oops, let's see here. Let me stop sharing for a second. That did not go as planned. I'm going to share my screen so that you can get the QR code for our survey. And there it is. Tori's also going to be dropping a link to the survey in the chat, but we really, really, really value all of your feedback on these webinars. So if you have just 30 seconds, scan that QR code with your phone, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And again, I'm excited to poke in that document and look at some of the other cartoons myself. But that's pretty much it. I want to say thank you again to Rachel. Lalo has logged off, but I want to say thank you again to Lalo for joining us this evening. Again, please stay in touch. If this was your first webinar from News Literacy Week, thank you for joining us. But as a reminder, we have lots of other resources as well as virtual events happening the next couple of days. So again, newsliteracyweek.org for some of those other resources. But Jennifer, excuse me, I saw Jennifer in the comments. Rachel, thank you so much again for joining us this evening. This was really awesome. Let's see, cannot show. I'm just briefly looking at the questions in case we missed anything. Yes, Tori, thank you so much for dropping that survey in the chat. Again, we really appreciate your feedback on these webinars. I hope everyone got a lot out of this session and has some creative ways that you yourself can incorporate editorial cartooning in the classroom, regardless of which subject area you teach. Yes, there will be a recording of this available, not via website. It will be sent to you in the email. Great. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your contact information. Great. I'm just making sure we don't have any lingering comments or questions. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us, everyone. And again, thank you so much to Rachel and Lalo for joining us. Oh, Rachel, you do have a question. Is it open to 6th grade?
Yes, it is middle school, middle and high school. So yes, free, come one, come all.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I can say bye to you and see you face to face. Again, thank you so much. And if you're watching this recording after the fact, I really hope that you're also doing the cartoon yourself. Have a great, lovely rest of your week, everyone. And again, happy National News Literacy Week. Bye, everyone.